The stars outside the viewport shimmered like dying embers, dimmed by the thick armor of the battleship Harbinger. Inside, everything smelled of oil and recycled air, humming faintly with restrained violence. Captain Rian Drax stood at the edge of the command deck, staring into the void. He wasn't a man who looked for answers in the stars. He had long since stopped expecting them. What he sought now wasn't redemption, or even revenge, but something far simpler. An end. Captain Drax, the ship's AI, Helia, intoned with sterile precision. Docking procedures with the enemy flagship will commence in 3 minutes. Last chance to withdraw. Rian didn't blink. Initiate final check on my suit and weapons. He'd seen plenty of combat before, enough to know courage had little to do with survival. He had the hollow stare of a man who no longer feared death, a trait that made commanders wary and soldiers superstitious. But this mission didn't allow for caution. It called for someone with nothing left to lose. The Kralin flagship, Oblivion's Maw, was a myth made metal. No fleet had returned after encountering it. No distress call, no wreckage, just a spreading silence in the void. Rumors claimed it was captained by a creature that even the Kralin feared, something more beast than soldier. Varzul. Rian mouthed the name without speaking it. He'd heard it whispered on dying lips in field hospitals, seen it scrawled in blood across crumbled bunkers. The unyielding, the butcher of Ganner, the monster beneath the bone. And Rian had asked, begged, for this assignment. He adjusted the reinforced collar of his pressure suit and attached a magnetic pulse rifle to his back. Beside him, the Marines watched with blank expressions. No good luck charms, no nods of solidarity. Just silence. Everyone knew he wasn't coming back. "Door's yours," said Lieutenant Kale, stepping aside. Rian walked alone down the narrow boarding bridge, boots clanging with finality. Each step echoed the certainty of his purpose. He was not here to survive. He was here to confront the thing that haunted a galaxy. The moment his boots met the alloy floor of the enemy vessel, the light changed. Human ships were sterile, angular, illuminated with practical precision. The Oblivion's Maw was something else, alive with shadows, its walls twisted into sinewy shapes, pulsing faintly like exposed muscle. The air was dry, tasting faintly of copper and something worse, decay mixed with electricity. "Helia," he whispered. "Begin mapping." A silent acknowledgement blinked in the corner of his visor, though the signal grew weaker with every step. The ship seemed to devour data, turning clean signals into static. After 50 meters, Helia went dark entirely. He pressed onward. Twisted corpses lay strewn across the corridor, both Kralin and human. The human ones had no visible wounds, only eyes wide in terror and mouths locked in silent screams. Something had killed them without touching them. The Kralin, for their part, had been torn apart, limbs flayed from torsos, their black ichor staining the floor in patterns like ritual glyphs. He paused by a broken helmet. Blood crusted the inside. A name was etched into the metal, W. Corsair. He remembered her. She had been in the briefing for the recon unit that vanished 3 months ago. Young, confident. He had liked her. A whisper rose behind him. He turned sharply. Nothing. Just the sound of something dripping, rhythmic, and mocking. His fingers hovered near his sidearm, but he didn't draw. Not yet. Further in, the corridors narrowed. The alien architecture folded on itself, as if the ship were coiling in discomfort. He passed through what looked like a birthing chamber, organic pods, some shattered, others moving faintly. He didn't stop to look inside. He finally reached a room larger than the others, a cathedral of violence. Skulls mounted on pipes, weapons from every known faction hung like trophies. At the center stood a monolith of blackened bone, carved with sigils that twisted when looked at too long. And across from it, standing in stillness, so complete it seemed part of the ship, was Varzul. He was taller than Rian expected. Nearly 8 feet, armor with overlapping plates that seemed grafted to his flesh. His skin was corded, raw, burned into ridges and lines that hinted at constant regeneration. His face had no symmetry, a nightmare-given form. One eye glowed dimly, the other a socket of void. Varzul did not move. Rian did not speak. They stared at each other across the silence. The alien tilted his head, not in confusion, but curiosity. Rian sensed the creature already knew everything it needed to about him, that it had watched him from the moment he stepped on board. Perhaps before. Rian reached behind his back slowly, unslinging the pulse rifle and powering it up with a low whine. Still, Varzul did nothing. Something shifted, atmosphere, energy, time. Rian couldn't tell. But suddenly, the chamber was empty again. The alien had vanished without a sound. Rian exhaled, a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Then the lights went out. Emergency red lighting bathed the room in pulses, each heartbeat revealing new angles, new shadows. A whisper breath at his ear sent him spinning, rifle raised. Nothing, a noise behind. Movement. He ran. He didn't flee in fear, but because the moment demanded it. This was no place for a first strike. The crawling warrior had chosen the battlefield, and Rian knew better than to challenge a predator in its den. He darted down a side tunnel, heart pounding now, sweat pooling at the edge of his brow despite the cool suit interior. The air shifted again, thickened, then lightened, like walking through water made a sound. In this place, even space betrayed its nature. He found another corridor, this one scorched, lined with the remains of a previous boarding team. They'd tried to make a stand here. The body suggested it hadn't lasted long. A data drive lay clutched in one man's charred hand. Rian pried it loose and slid it into his wrist port. The file opened with a sputter, audio only. This thing, it watches, it waits. It doesn't kill because it must. It kills because it wants to understand. The message cut off. From behind, a faint clicking began. Not metal on metal, but bone on bone. Rian turned, gun raised, eyes searching. Nothing, but he knew better. He was being hunted. And for the first time in years, Captain Rian Drax felt alive. He tightened his grip on the rifle and moved deeper into the dark, a ghost chasing a demon. Rian moved in silence, each step measured, every breath controlled. The rifle in his grip felt heavier now, not from fatigue, but from the oppressive weight of the ship's atmosphere. The Oblivion's maw wasn't just a vessel. It was a labyrinth carved from nightmares, pulsing with intelligence that bent the laws of space around itself. He knew the alien was here, watching, waiting. The corridor twisted without warning. Metal turned to something like chitin, curving inward like a throat. Organic tubing slithered along the walls, reacting subtly to his presence. Rian's boot sank slightly into the floor with each step, and the muted sound of movement echoed from places he couldn't see. Not quite footsteps, more like breathing. He entered a chamber half lit by an eerie bioluminescence. It was shaped like a dome, and at its center stood a strange structure, an altar surrounded by fragmented armor and scorched weapons. Human tech. Rian stepped closer, eyes narrowing. Scattered around the altar were dog tags. Dozens of them. He knelt and picked up one. Salek, another name he recognized. Salek had gone missing during a recon sweep near the edge of crawling space, one of the first to vanish without a trace. Now Rian understood why there had never been wreckage. The monster kept trophies. A sound like grinding stone turned his head. Varzul stood at the edge of the room, half shrouded in shadow. There was no warning, no sound of entry. One moment the chamber was empty. The next, it held death incarnate. The alien's body was massive, corded with muscle and glistening with scar tissue. Tubes and armor plating fused seamlessly into its form, as if grown rather than forged. Its eyes, those cold, inhuman orbs, locked with Rian's. They gleamed with something more than instinct, intellect, awareness. Neither of them moved. Rian's finger tense on the trigger. The alien did nothing. Then, slowly, impossibly, it turned and vanished into the corridor again, as if daring him to follow. Rian hesitated only a moment. He couldn't make sense of the alien's behavior, but he knew this much. Whatever Varzul wanted, it involved him. And if the creature wanted to play games, Rian would play to win. He pursued, moving deeper into the vessel. The ship changed around him, hallways no longer consistent in structure or logic. One moment he walked down a narrow corridor. The next he emerged into a vertical shaft that pulsed like a throat. The architecture defied logic, twisting into the impossible. The mall was more than a ship. It was a mind, and it was rearranging itself to suit its master. A distant scream shattered the silence. It wasn't human. It wasn't even alive. Rian followed the sound, rifle raised. As he advanced, flickers of movement danced just beyond the edge of his vision. He paused, lifted the rifle scope, and scanned ahead. Something moved in the dark. A flash of claws, the glint of eyes, then nothing. Not Varzul. Something smaller, faster. Drones maybe, or guardians. Or hallucinations. He couldn't tell anymore. As he crept into another chamber, the lights burst to life. Not artificial. This light was golden, alive, seeping from walls like radiant blood. In the center of the room hovered projection. It looked human at first. A man, screaming in frozen agony, his skin stretched taut and eyes wide. Then it spoke, not in words, but in memory. Rian staggered as images slammed into his mind. His childhood home on Mars, his sister's laughter, the crater remains of the refugee camp where his family died. Then the massacre, crawling soldiers descending like predators, ripping through civilians with surgical brutality. His father's blood on his boots, his mother's final breath in his arms. He screamed and fell to his knees, clutching his head. The projection shimmered, revealing its true form, a neural mimic, a psychic echo designed not to kill, but to fracture the mind. Varzul was testing him. He bit down, forced himself to breathe. Focus. The pain wasn't real. The memories were, but the pain was being twisted, amplified, weaponized. Rian stood. He wasn't a man who broke. Not anymore. I remember worse, he muttered, and fired a burst into the core of the mimic. The projection shattered into shards of light, fading into smoke. The air grew still. Then came the whisper, not spoken aloud, but inside his head. A voice, not like Helia's, not mechanical. It was layered, deep, ancient. You are not what I expected. Rian steadied himself. Neither are you. He didn't know if the alien could truly understand him, but the ship seemed to respond. A low vibration thrummed through the floor, almost like laughter. A door slid open ahead. He stepped through. The room beyond was cavernous. It felt sacred in some way, though the altar in its center dripped with fluids too dark to be blood. Figures lined the walls, armor-clad husks, crawling warriors frozen in place. Statues? Corpses? He couldn't tell. Varzul stood alone, waiting. Rian walked forward until they stood an arm's length apart. He noticed now that the alien's chest bore deep, healed scars, old wounds, not from battle but ritual, self-inflicted. Perhaps marks of discipline, of purpose. The creature tilted its head again. You came to die. The thought echoed within Rian's skull. A mental push, not quite speech, but undeniable in intent. Rian answered aloud. Not anymore. He saw it then, a flicker of something in the alien's posture. Not confusion, not fear, recognition. Varzul stepped aside, gesturing to the chamber. Not to surrender, but to invite. Rian didn't lower his weapon. He moved with caution, every instinct screaming that this was a trap. But there was no strike, no ambush, just silence, and eyes watching. He reached the altar. On it lay a small device, human technology, a memory shard. He picked it up and slotted it into his wrist port. A hologram flickered to life. A man in Federation uniform, bloodied and trembling. If you're seeing this, I failed. Varzul isn't just a warrior. He's the philosopher, a scientist. He doesn't fight to win. He fights to learn, to evolve. He let me live, then hunted me, again and again, until I broke. The message cut out. Rian stared at the alien across the room. He realized then that Varzul had never truly lost a battle. Every enemy who survived had been allowed to study like insects in a jar, their strengths cataloged, their weaknesses dissected. And now, the alien had chosen him, not as prey, as a puzzle. He backed away slowly, heart hammering in his chest. Varzul didn't follow. Rian reached the door and stepped through. The moment he did, the lights in the previous chamber died. The door behind him sealed. He stood now in another corridor, the walls pulsing with renewed life. The hunt had truly begun. The temperature in the corridor had dropped. Condensation clung to the walls like sweat, and each of Rian's exhalations came out in pale, visible puffs. He moved with careful precision now, not from fear, but from focus sharpened by knowledge. Varzul wasn't a beast. He was a mind, curious, methodical, relentless. The alien had studied others before, breaking them like code. But Rian wasn't here to be deciphered. He was here to break the pattern. The corridor spiraled downward, leading him to a lower deck that felt submerged, as though it existed beneath the physical ship, in some abyssal fold of its design. The walls were etched with symbols, Kralin runes mixed with unfamiliar markings. They shimmered when Rian passed, reacting to his proximity. The ship was alive and alert now, aware of him. He tapped his wrist console, checking the signal feed. Helia's voice, crackling and distorted, finally broke through. "Vital signs erratic, Commander. Are you compromised?" He exhaled with relief. "Still me." "Still standing." "I detect elevated adrenaline and neural strain." "Get used to it." Silence. Then, after a pause, Helia said softly, "The entity is engaging in psychological warfare. I noticed." Ahead, the hallway terminated in a vast, circular space unlike any he'd seen. The chamber was planetary in scale, vast and domed. Its ceiling displayed a false sky, twilight burning against alien stars. But the most arresting sight was a mural. It covered the entire curved wall, a tapestry of conflict rendered in impossible detail. Rian approached. It was history, a visual chronicle of war, thousands of battles, millions of deaths, and always the same central figure, Varzul or his kind, standing over the fallen, sometimes victorious, sometimes defeated, but always present. At the edge of the mural, one panel was unfinished. The lines were drawn, the scene set, and in the center, clearly outlined, stood Rian, not just a human. Him. He stepped back. Varzul had known he would come. Not hoped. Known. The air shifted, and the alien emerged from the shadows. Not like before, no slow, deliberate reveal. This time, Varzul was already moving, crossing the chamber at full stride. No pretense. No games. Only purpose. Rian fired instinctively, but the alien dodged, blurring sideways with unnatural speed. The shot scorched stone. Another pulse of light left his rifle. Varzul closed the distance. Rian ducked, rolled, sprang up and fired again. It connected. The bolt slammed into Varzul's side, staggering him. But there was no blood, no cry of pain, only a sharp intake of breath, and then, astonishingly, laughter. Deep, guttural, not mockery, but approval. Varzul surged forward. Rian barely raised his weapon in time before the alien struck. The force knocked him off his feet and sent him tumbling across the floor. He skidded, came up bruised but alert, and ducked beneath a second blow. He used his momentum to drive his boot into the alien's knee. It gave slightly. Enough. He rolled behind one of the stone pylons, took aim again, and fired a concentrated burst. The pillar above Varzul exploded in dust, collapsing over him in a roar of debris. Rian didn't wait to see the result. He sprinted across the chamber and through a narrow opening on the other side. His lungs burned, his heart pounded, but his mind was clear. The hunt was no longer one-sided. He didn't flee blindly. He mapped the ship's logic as he ran, its pulsing arteries, its adaptive hulls. It moved like a neural maze, reshaping corridors based on threat proximity. Rian began to anticipate its patterns, cutting through maintenance shafts and service tunnels, staying a half step ahead of the reshaping. Behind him, distant, rhythmic footsteps echoed. Not hurried, confident. He ducked into a chamber lined with mirrored surfaces. His own reflection stared back from 1,000 angles, fragmented and repeated. He turned slowly, rifle raised. But Varzul didn't appear in the mirrors. Instead, they showed memories. His unit, laughing after a skirmish. His sister, holding up a crude drawing of their family. His own face, years younger, naive, before the war took everything. The mirrors pulsed. The reflections changed. Now, the same people lay dead, faces contorted in terror. The scene played again and again, looping their final moments. You think this breaks me? Rian growled. I live with this. The glass cracked under his voice. He fired into the ceiling. Glass exploded downward, cutting through illusion and noise. The light flickered, and a hidden door hissed open. He stepped through into a narrow stairwell. Metal again, this time clean and precise. Human. It was the first real architecture he'd seen since boarding the Oblivion's maw. He descended cautiously. At the bottom was a door with a Federation seal. Faded, scorched, but intact. He touched the panel. It hissed open. Inside was a control room, an abandoned outpost buried in the alien vessel. Terminals, storage crates, a medical station. Clearly once human, now reclaimed by the alien mind. The lights buzzed dimly. In the corner, a corpse sat slumped in a chair. Dog tags still hung from its neck. Rian approached, gently lifted them. Commander Alden Shaw. He remembered Shaw, commander at Prometheus, presumed dead during the Krallen assault 3 years ago. A log device blinked weakly on the terminal. Rian played it. Shaw's voice crackled through. If anyone finds this, you're not crazy. The ship's alive. It's learning. It made me fight myself. Over and over. Until I didn't know what was real anymore. But there's a core. A heart. Deep in the ship. That's where it controls everything. Destroy it, and maybe, just maybe, it dies. The message ended with static. Behind him, the chamber's lights dimmed. Rian turned slowly. Varzul stood in the doorway. Blood and dust streaked across his armored form. But he made no move. No immediate attack. The alien tilted his head, studying him. You endured. The words pulsed like thunder in Rian's skull. He stood his ground. You thought I wouldn't? No. I hoped you would. Rian's grip tightened on his weapon. Why? Varzul took a step forward. Slowly. Not threateningly. You're different. You learn. You fight without desperation. Without rage. There's clarity in you. Discipline. That is rare. Rian blinked. You admire that? I was once like you. Before evolution demanded sacrifice. My kind abandoned weakness. I remained understand it. To perfect it. He pointed to the mural on the ceiling. Your species is reaching the cusp. Conflict is your catalyst. You are the proof. Rian exhaled slowly. So what now? You kill me and move on to the next test subject. Varzul was silent for a long moment. Then he knelt. It was not submission. It was invitation. Join me. Learn as I have. Become more than the weapon they made you. Rian stared at him. Everything in his blood screamed to end this now. To fire. To destroy the thing that had haunted his mind since this mission began. And yet, he saw not a monster, but something terrifyingly human. A creature forged by loss, by war, by necessity. So was he. Before he could answer, a tremor shook the chamber. Lights overhead flared red. Helia's voice burst through his comm again, sharp and urgent. Commander, I've established a breach route through the lower decks. Extraction window, 3 minutes. Rian looked at Varzul. You knew this would happen. The alien's eyes glowed. I calculated the probability. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Rian raised his. The tremor that shook the chamber didn't subside. It deepened, evolving into a low-frequency hum that seemed to resonate in Rian's bones. Dust sifted down from the ceiling as the walls of the alien vessel began to respond, flexing and reshaping as if aware of the decision he was poised to make. Varzul remained kneeling, eyes unblinking, watching Rian with the patience of a monument carved from war and willpower. Rian's calm crackled again. Helia's voice, tense and sharp, cut through the silence. Extraction point stabilizing. You have 2 minutes. Commander, I repeat, 2 minutes. He didn't move. He studied Varzul, the terrifying grace of the alien stillness, the deliberate calm. For all the creature's brute strength and savagery in battle, there was a strange serenity in him now, as if he had no doubt what Rian would choose. You want me to become like you, Rian said, voice low. But you're alone. Whatever knowledge you gain, it costs you everything. Varzul rose slowly, towering and composed, his breath hissing softly through the vents of his armor. Evolution requires sacrifice. So does understanding. The weak bond to survive. The strong walk alone to lead. I didn't come to lead, Rian replied. I came to end this. The alien tilted his head. Then why hesitate? Rian didn't answer. The chamber walls began to retract, revealing a circular stairwell beneath them, spiraling downward into the heart of the ship. Deep below, an immense pulse of blue light surged once, then faded. The core. He looked toward the stairwell, then back at Varzul. Is that where you want this to end? Where it must. With one last breath, Rian turned and descended. The stairs were steep, the metal growing hotter with each step. The air grew thinner, more charged, as if thick with static and memory. Below, the core chamber awaited, larger than any other space within the ship, its ceiling disappearing into darkness above. Its center dominated by a massive orb of liquid metal, suspended in place by a matrix of tendrils and veins of energy. The ship's mind. Around the chamber's edges, platforms hovered with alien precision. Data swam across them like oil on water. Images, thoughts, schematics of species dissected and reformed. Rian saw his own face among them. Scanned, studied, surrounded by probabilities, as if the ship were still trying to determine what he would do. Helia's voice came one final time. 1 minute. Extraction padlocked. This is your last window, Rian. He stepped toward the core. Varzul followed without sound. You let others reach this place? Rian asked, not turning. All those soldiers before me? Some. Few. Most broke before they could walk this path. You did not. And what if I destroy it? Then I die. The knowledge dies. The pattern resets. And if I don't? Varzul was silent for a long breath. Then you inherit it. You become more. But less. There is no return. The orb pulsed again, brighter now, aware of their presence. It had no voice, no face. Yet Rian felt its awareness coil around him like a serpent. It did not plead. It invited. He raised his weapon. Paused. He could pull the trigger and end it all. But was that justice or ego? The Federation would see this as victory. Clean. Cathartic. But Rian had seen too much of war to believe in clean endings. He lowered the weapon slightly. Why me, Varzul? Why not kill me when you had the chance? The alien stepped closer, not threatening but present, because I saw a mirror, not a form, a function. You do not fight for orders or vengeance. You fight to understand. Like me, Rian closed his eyes. He thought of his sister, of the cratered outpost, of the people he couldn't save, then of those who still lived, millions who had no idea this war had evolved beyond their understanding. They deserved peace, not more shadows pulling strings in the dark. He opened his eyes. Then we do it my way. Before Varzul could respond, Rian surged forward and slammed the data spike, one of his few remaining tools, into the exposed junction near the core. The orb screamed, not with sound, but with light. A flood of images burst outward, memories, languages, blueprints. The ship convulsed. Varzul lunged, not to stop him, but to steady him, grabbing his arm as the chamber erupted in energy. The data spike drew from the core and beamed everything. Every fragment of knowledge, every pattern, every schema, directly into Helia's uplink. Transmission in progress, Helia confirmed, her voice strained. Core destabilizing. You must leave now. Rian turned to Varzul, whose expression was unreadable. You want an understanding? I'm giving it to everyone. Not just the strongest. Not just the survivors. No more secrets. The alien let go of his arm. His head bowed once. Then you are greater than I imagined. Rian turned and ran. Behind him, the chamber buckled. The orb collapsed inward, folding time and space as energy tore through the tendrils, anchoring it. As he reached the stairwell, the floor behind him disintegrated into glowing fragments. He didn't look back. The corridors shifted wildly, trying to trap him. the ship fighting its own death, but he'd studied its patterns. He moved through the chaos with purpose, every turn calculated. At last, the final door opened onto the extraction pad. The light of Helia's transport ship bathed the platform in gold. He leapt, the ship lifted, the Oblivion's maw shuddering behind him, its form collapsing, folding into itself like a dying star. As they ascended, Helia's voice returned. Data upload complete. Core annihilated. Commander, we did it. He slumped into the seat, soaked in sweat, chest heaving. Below, there was only silence. And then a shadow. From the dust, a shape emerged. Not whole, wounded, flickering with energy. Varzul stood on the collapsing deck of his dying ship, watching the transport vanish into the clouds. He didn't move to follow. He only watched, and saluted. Rian closed his eyes. The image burned into memory. He didn't know if the alien would survive, but he knew this. He hadn't won by being stronger. He'd won by being human. And that, at last, was enough.